So you're a photographer, maybe you're a wildlife photographer like me, and the amount of storage required to save your photos and videos keeps growing. And you're thinking about expanding your system, and you've heard of an NAS storage system or a NAS storage system, but you're not really sure what it is, and you're not really sure if you need one. Well, today, in the second part of a two-part series around storing your photos, I'm going to talk about a NAS system, one I recently got my hands on from a company called UGREEN. I'm going to tell you my experience with this. I'm going to demystify what this NAS system is and tell you how it differs from other types of storage, some of the pros, even the cons of this storage system. And I'll tell you all about it right after this. Now, in the first video I did around storage, I talked about direct attached storage systems. We were speaking of SSD drives and hard disk drives. I mentioned the speed differences and some ways to be more effective and efficient with their uses, and also some workflow. So check out that video if you're curious about that. I have some tips in there just to help you improve your speed and efficiency around storage. And a lot of people have some questions around storage, and I had a lot of people asking me over the last several months about NAS or NAS devices. And I reached out to a company called UGREEN and I said, hey, I want to do this video on storage. I'd like to talk about NAS. I don't have the system. And they were nice enough to send me the system. Now, I always mention how I got my hand on products. So this was sent to me for use around this video. However, it is not a paid sponsorship and I don't get anything on the back end of this video. I also retain all editorial content. You know me as the practical wildlife photographer, so I'm going to give it to you straight. I'm going to tell you the pros and the cons around this system and things that I experienced with this. And I got to tell you, I was really pleased with the ease of use of this. I thought it was going to be a very complicated thing, seemed a little scary, wasn't sure how to set it up, had never used one before. And I can just tell you the setup was extremely easy. It walked me right through it. I'm actually going to show you a couple things around this practically. I'm going to show you the app and what that looked like. I'm going to show you a little bit of the setup, although this is by far not a tutorial on how to set up a NAS system. What it is an introduction to a NAS system, and do I need one? Is it worth it? And who's it for? So let's just explain what a NAS system is. This is a network attached storage system. The direct attached systems are physically tethered or inserted into the motherboard of your computer. They are hardwired into that system. For that, they generally have better speed. A network attached system is not directly attached, at least not the way we think of it. We're now working off of our network. And for some people, it might be easier to think of this as a cloud-based device, but it's really not in many ways. I'll talk about the differences between NAS and cloud storage in just a minute. But this device lives on our own personal network. Now, we can attach it a couple different ways. So one of the ways to attach it would be to just access it through our Wi-Fi. So we set up the device, we install the passwords, and we get onto our network. And we now have a remote storage device that can be accessed wirelessly. And the nice thing about all of these devices is that they can be accessed remotely. You don't physically need the device with you. There is another way to connect this device, and this is actually the way I connected the device. I'll put some graphics up here just to help you understand how this could look. But this device that I have is connected via Ethernet. And in my head, when I got this, I thought, I'll just hook the Ethernet up to the computer and hook the other end up to the NAS device, because that's typically what we think of when we think of external storage. But it's really not the way it works. I hooked my Ethernet up into my router, and I've got a Wi-Fi router that's got a switcher built into it. So the process was actually pretty easy. I connected the NAS to my router. I connected my computer to the router, and the router has a built-in switch which allows them all to talk to each other. And if I ever lost that Ethernet connection, or the cable broke, or I just took it out for some reason, I could just switch over and access that hard drive from my Wi-Fi network. Makes sense so far? So it's not directly attached to the system as we normally think about it. It can be attached via Ethernet. But the interesting thing about the NAS system is the location that you choose to put it in. So I could put this system right here on my desktop. A lot of people do that. I could have it down there on the floor. In my case, I've got it in the other room just because it was more practical to keep it next to my router. If I was really wanting to do so, I could keep it off site. So if I was worried that something might happen at my house and there was a more secure location, I could install that NAS device somewhere completely elsewhere, not even on my property. As long as I can connect it to the internet and I can get a hold of it through my network, I can set it up anywhere that I want. Now, because these systems are attached to a network and not hardwired to the computer, it offers me a few advantages. One, I can access this remotely from anywhere. So if I'm on my laptop and I've got an internet connection, I can start to pull up files from my NAS system no matter where I am in the world. It works a little bit like the cloud that way, and we often think of cloud storage and I can access anything from anywhere. The key difference is I own this system. This isn't me renting space to Dropbox or Google Drive or one of these third-party platforms. Even Lightroom users might be familiar with their cloud-based storage. In this case, the storage is my own. I'm not sending my information for somebody else to store for me. And it avoids things like monthly recurring fees. I can store anything I want and I can access it anywhere, and it's all my personal information. I can also allow access for other users. So because they can also log in remotely, if I've in a small business or got a small group application, if we're working on a project, we can all access this NAS device through our own passwords and logins. And as the administrator, I can control who can see what and who can do what. This system is also a smart system. So this has a built-in processor and it's got built-in memory. And because of that, there's also integrated software. So this storage device allows me to do more than just upload and download and store things and retrieve them. I can actually set up backup systems and I can set how I want those things to be backed up. I could mirror an existing drive, for an example. In just a minute, I'm going to show you my computer and I'm going to show you the NAS software that came from UGREEN, and I'm going to show you how I've mirrored some of my drives already. Now, there's a lot of different applications for this, and we're going to get to a few more of those in this video, but I want to take a minute to break down this particular device. Now, the device that I have and the one that I've been using for the last couple months is called the DXP 4800 Pro, and this is a 4-bay drive. Each of the drives that I have has 4 terabytes available. That means 4 times 4 is 16 terabytes in the total system. Now, because I'm using a RAID or a redundancy, it's going to use some of that storage in this redundancy process. Now, that's a protection that is offered by a RAID system that you don't get with a standard hard disk drive. This means if my hard disk drive fails, there's one drive, and if it fails, I'm done. If I haven't backed up that information, I could potentially lose years, maybe a decade worth of photos. If I have a RAID system in place, odds are that only one of those 4 drives would ever fail. And if it did, the information from the other drives is kind of partitioned along each of the existing drives. Essentially what it means is if one drive goes bad, I can replace it and I can rebuild all of the information using the existing 3 drives. Now, I'm not smart enough to understand how that works, but I know that's the premise behind it. One failure of any of those hard drives is not catastrophic. One failure of a standalone hard drive could be catastrophic. So this is the system that I have. They sent me a 16 terabyte. And by the way, thank you so much to UGREEN because I have so enjoyed playing with this. I'm going to show you some of the stuff I'm using it for already. This system, if you were looking in the marketplace, this would be considered like a mid to high-end system, probably not upper tier, but definitely not like entry level. It's got a lot of applications that are not available for hard disk drives. And when I compare UGREEN to some of the other companies out there, I'm finding the value proposition to be about 20% less than some of its competitors. Each of these competitors, by the way, will use proprietary software. Some of those competitors have been around longer than UGREEN has, but I will tell you this, in terms of using their software, I have found it exceptional. Did a little bit of research and reviews on this, and I've also found the reviews to be very, very favorable. So I have really enjoyed using this DXP 4800 Pro system. I'll put a link down there, and if you're interested in that, you can use that link to take a look at it yourself. And I'm going to show you just pricing differences real quick. For me, if I'm going to upgrade my memory, which I very may well just say, hey, I like this system so much, let me go to the next level of storage. I want to get up to 32 terabytes of information. That'll probably last me another decade. The cost on this, the total cost, is going to be the cost of the enclosure, the 4-bay enclosure, around $600, plus the cost of the storage. So 4 8 TB drives. I'm looking at a total, if I buy it as a package, of around $2,000. Now, if I was just to go out and buy a dumb HDD drive, a drive that doesn't have all these built-in technologies and I can't access remotely, I'm probably going to pay over $1,500 anyway. So pricing, while you're paying more than a standard HDD drive, you are getting a lot of value for that extra money. And again, UGREEN is placed kind of in this sweet spot, mid-price point, not as expensive as some of their competitors, and certainly not an entry-level brand. UGREEN's been around for several years, and their software has developed slowly, and it's getting better and better all the time. So I can speak with this unit with a lot of confidence. While I haven't used it long, the software has been very, very easy to use. I'm going to show you that in just a minute. Some of the features, by the way, of this one, in addition to those 4 bays, it's got 2 NVMe SSD slots. I mentioned that in the first video, those being super fast storage. It's got 10 GB Ethernet plus 2.5 GB networking. What that means is you can get some really fast connections. In my case, my computer can't even handle it. It's not advanced enough to handle those connections, but I'm built in for future upgrades of my computer. This one has an Intel Core i3 processor. It's got expandable RAM. And then I mentioned that it had that RAID support. So this one supports RAID 5, which I use, but it also supports RAID 6 and RAID 10. I don't want to get too technical on this stuff, but I do want to throw that out there because those are some of the key features around this particular product. Now, let me show you how it works. You're talking, you've been talking about this system, but what do I do with it? Well, I'm going to show you a couple of practical applications for this. So on the first I'm just going to pull up full screen here. I'm just going to pull up the actual app. So this is what the app looks like. This is UGREEN's software dock. Now this is their desktop app. And then on the side over here, I'll also pull up what the app looks like on my iPhone. And for fun, I'll even show you kind of side by side. If I minimize this app, I'm now going to pull up my personal file explorer. And you're going to see that here under my computer is a drive called SSD1TB. This, for those of you that have followed my first video, this is my working drive. This is where I edit things and cull things. And when I'm done with this folder, I will then send it to archive. But what I wanted to show you is how I can mirror this drive onto my NAS system. So over on the NAS application, the UGREEN app, I'm going to open up this thing that says files, and you're going to see one that says 1 TB working drive. Now this is something I created. I told my storage device, make this folder. And then I told it or programmed it what to do. So I said, sync it to my computer, sync it to this drive, and back it up overnight every night and mirror them. So they always look like each other. If I make changes to one, the changes get made to the other one. If I make changes to this one, it gets mirrored over to the SSD drive. So they're constantly mirror images of each other. Let me show you how that works. If you look at this SSD drive on the app, I'm going to open this up and you'll see one that says 1 review. And then you'll see it says macro. And if I go over here, you're going to see one that says 1 review. And then you're going to see that same file that says macro. And I can keep going down to each subfolder. These are the current macro files that I'm working on by year and by day. So pretty straightforward. I can also access this remotely through my iPhone. So I take out my iPhone, I open it up, and I can access all of these folders and files. I can download them directly to my phone. If I ever wanted to upload images, if I was out in the middle of the country and I didn't have access to my systems, I could actually just pull it up on my phone. I could download that image and I could upload it onto social media if I wanted to, or however I needed to access it. I could also organize it through either of those apps. I download that same app on my laptop, and when I'm out traveling, like I will be in a couple weeks, I'm going to go access some of these files. And the reason I'm mirroring my working files is because if I want to work on a file on the road, I'm bored, there's nothing to do in the middle of the day, I can pull up one of those working files and I can actually edit it on my laptop, and then I can download it again. The other advantage, or what most people will use this for, is actually for just their archived storage. So you may take that hard drive and you may say, you know what, I'm done with hard drives. I'm not going to use it anymore. I'm just going to use this NAS system for all of my archiving. If you do that, I would encourage you to make sure you upgrade your memory. So get more storage than you think you need. I always tell people get double what you think you need, and that'll keep you for another decade. There's a couple of workflows, and I'll list them over here on the side, of how you could use a device like this. So for example number one, I always, by the way, if you saw my first video, I'm always going to encourage you to have an SSD drive where you do your editing from. From there, you could then use your NAS as your primary storage for archiving. But we always want to back up our information. Now, how you decide to do that is up to you. You can use a cloud-based service to back up your NAS, or you can try maybe a different configuration. The configuration that I'm using right now would be that my computer has a solid state drive that I edit from. It also has a hard drive. I'm going to keep that hard drive for now. I'm going to back that hard drive up to that NAS system. And then I'm going to back up my hard drive into the cloud using a service called Backblaze. Now, I'm not sponsored by Backblaze. There's pros and cons of that service. Maybe one day I'll do a video about backing up your images. But this allows me to get a lower monthly rate to back up my hard disk drives. As a caveat, and I would say one of the only cons that I could think of for this video is when you back up a NAS system, the pricing tiers will change. You could pay as much as 3 to 5 or 10 times as much to back up your NAS device as you do to back up a standard hard drive. That's just something I'll put out there. You can research it on your own to figure out if that works for you. There's a lot of different workflows. And the reason I'm putting a couple of options up here is just to show you there's a lot of different workflows. There's a general guideline around storage. It's called 3-2-1. And in general, for somebody really serious about protecting their images, it means you're going to have 3 copies of each file on 2 different types of media, and you're going to have 1 copy completely off-site. Now, that may sound like overkill for some people, and it might be. But the reason or the rationale behind this is if there's a physical disaster at your home, it is recommended that something be stored off-site, and normally that's going to be cloud-based storage. Now, I will tell you, one of the other interesting things about NAS is you can back up a personal NAS to another personal NAS. You could have 2 NAS machines, never pay a monthly rental fee to anybody for your images. The upfront cost would be significant, but honestly, if you had those 2 systems long enough, you might pay for yourself in backup data. So you have one NAS at your house and it's being backed up to another NAS somewhere in a secure area. I also have read about people taking their NAS devices in their home and kind of fireproofing them to protect them and making sure they're flood-proof so that if there's a disaster in your computer, something happens to your computer, your NAS is still safe. Now, in just a minute, I'm going to tell you who a NAS system is probably for and maybe who it's not for. But before I do that, I need to demystify how complex these systems are. While it can sound pretty overwhelming, I found this system to be very easy to install. So over here on the side, I'm going to pull up the UGREEN website and I'm going to just scroll through here. I followed these steps literally. Opened the box, I uploaded a YouTube video, and I found that to be really overkill. I watched it, but I didn't need it because all I really needed to do was to go to this NAS website from UGREEN, put in my device and scroll down and follow it step by step. I set this system up in about 15 minutes. And once I had all my information in there and I named my network and I put in my passwords and I told it the way I wanted to handle the RAID or that redundancy, I let it initialize. I walked away. I came back a couple hours later. I'm not sure how long that process took, but within 3 hours, I can tell you that process was done and I was off and running. The only thing I had to do after that was tell the system what I wanted it to do. Which drives did I want to mirror? How did I want it to back up? The schedules that I wanted it to do. And I did not find that to be an overwhelming chore. The app made it really, really simple. So who is a NAS system for? Well, here's what I can tell you. If you are serious in getting large amounts of storage, if you've got multiple drives and you're like, I just keep adding drives and drives, if you constantly find yourself upgrading these storage devices and you're getting into this, 12 terabyte plus or even 8 terabytes plus, it might be time to start looking at some more serious storage. Again, this is scalable. I would always encourage you to get a lot more than you think you need. Bite the bullet once, pay for it now, use it for the next 10 years. But in the case in 8 to 10 years, you want to upgrade, you can actually just scale up the devices and allow this whole thing to just get larger and larger and larger as you go. I didn't mention this earlier, but it is recommended that all 4 of those drives be the same capacity so they don't mix and match sizes. That has more to do with that redundancy process than anything else. Listen, you could use a NAS device just simply as a dumb hard drive, but you're not really maximizing it at that point. If you are somebody who likes to remotely access files, this is a real selling point for a NAS device. I could be anywhere in the world as long as I'm internet connected. I could both upload and download information. If I'm worried about losing a file on the road, I could plug my memory card from that day in, and I could actually back it up into a NAS system overnight while I sleep, wake up the next day, and I know I'm protected. Maybe I've also downloaded it to a hard drive to have redundancy right there in the field. I've got one on a solid state drive, and then I've got a copy of all of the images I took from that trip over on my NAS storage device stored remotely. That's a huge benefit. If you work in small teams or you have a small business and you like this idea of having multiple people access one drive where things can be stored and shared, an absolute game changer for that application. And finally, if you like the idea of having a device that can have flexibility in how you back up your data, it's certainly something to look for. Now, could this be overkill? Maybe. If you are shooting a small volume of photos, so you're only shooting handfuls or you only go out once a month to shoot photos, you look at your storage device and you say, how much data have I stored? And you've only stored in the last 5 years 1 terabyte of information, and you're going at a slow pace. This may be overkill for you. Maybe you stick to a solid state drive and a hard drive. Even if that's your choice, I would highly recommend that you have a backup plan in place, because that one hard drive failure would cost you all of your photos, images, and videos. So make sure at the very minimum you have a plan to back up all of your information, even if it's not on a NAS device. So hopefully in this video, I demystified these NAS devices a little bit and kept it simple enough to understand, maybe piqued your curiosity a little bit. Maybe you understand the difference between these direct attached devices and these network attached devices. Most importantly, I hope you see the flexibility around both storage and backup potential, and also to safely have some redundancy in your system if there's a drive failure. Hopefully I stressed all of those points in this video. Again, I want to thank UGREEN for sending me this particular model. I've really enjoyed it. I found it super easy to set up and work with, and I'm really excited about exploring even more possibilities and maybe trying some new things that I haven't already set up in my personal system here, but I have absolutely enjoyed the product thus far. If you're new to the channel, take a minute and subscribe down below. I really do appreciate your support. Hit the bell for notifications. That lets you know when I have a new video out. And hit the like button. That'll push the content out to like-minded individuals. Stay tuned because I have a lot more content up. I'll be going back out into the field to do some wildlife photography and share some thoughts around that in the future. And as always, I hope we can continue to find inspiration in wildlife together.